Good evening and welcome to the Book Show. We've got another great show tonight. We've got a special guest, Maureen Sudlow. We'll be talking with her later. But in the meantime, it's time to say hello to my co-host, John Reynolds. John, how are you, sir?
Good to be here, sir.
Yes. Good to see you as always. The world of books.
The world of books, where we've got a couple of local books or a couple of local pieces of news, and then we go back to the countdown of the top 100 novels as suggested by the British. We'll come back to that in a few moments. We talked about the Wairarapa writers, I think about a month ago, and they've been running a performance by 16 writers, and that was performed last Saturday, I think. But these 16 poets have published a book which is available free. It's a free ebook. And so if you'd like to get hold of that, because Wairarapa is quite a place for writers, as we'll see when we talk about the book of the week later on. But if you'd like to get a hold of that book, you can just download it for free. I won't attempt to read it all out because it's down the bottom of your screen. So that's Wairarapa writers.
Okay.
Okay. Now you're old enough to remember the Springbok tour, aren't you?
Several of them.
The 81,
yes.
the 81 Springbok,
81.
the 81 Springbok tour. Yes, indeed, ingrained in all our minds. I've always been surprised that there aren't more books or novels set around the Springbok tour, because it was almost civil war in New Zealand.
It was indeed. And there was well, I remember being, I think of it as run over in Molesworth Street. But,
yes, and that final demonstration, I was there in the fourth test outside, and watching the plane flying over and flower bags.
So there's a lot of stories there.
A lot of stories there. And a Dunedin novelist, Paddy Richardson, who has she's got a television journalist as her protagonist called Rebecca Thorne. She's written a book called Cross Fingers. And the story is about the fact that she's got to get involved in a documentary marking an anniversary of the 81 Springbok tour. Okay, so she goes ahead to do that. But she needs a new angle. And she discovers the story of two men who dressed up as lambs and danced their protest. Now, when I read about that, I thought, wait a minute, there were the clowns. You remember the clowns?
The famous photo
test?
of the clown.
Yes, and they got worked over by the police.
To the policeman.
Yeah, and then they got hammered for being clowns by the police, which was very nasty. Well, I'm not sure about these lambs, whether this is just a fictional thing, but it links in with the clowns. Then they disappeared, and no one knows where they went. And so, in this book, Cross Fingers, the protagonist, Rebecca Thorne, does a bit of digging, and she finds it's all linked up with a property developer and a formerly a crooked policeman. Did he get the money to start his business as a result of this crooked policeman's activity? The reviewer suggests that Richardson again shows her gift for characterization and concerns for social issues in this complex and complete novel. I want to check that one out because I have vivid memories of the Springbok tour, and I think there's a wealth of stuff still to be explored.
Yes, indeed.
So, Cross Fingers by Paddy Richardson. Then you remember last week we talked about the 100 greatest novels of all time, the list. And this was compiled by The Guardian and The Observer, both good British newspapers.
Yep.
So we got from 1 to 10. Let's have a look at 11 to 20. See what you think.
Righto. I know what I think. Well, I know what I think about last week.
Okay,
but I know what some people told me about last week as well.
It's quite interesting because some of these you will immediately say, yes, I know that one, and others you'll say, huh? But of course, this is a British view, and I'm sure if it was the top 10 Washington Post or the top 10 New York Times, it would be different.
Or the top 10 John Reynolds.
Oh, well, indeed. Hey, I've only written 2. Okay. Nightmare Abbey by Thomas Love Peacock, a classic miniature, a brilliant satire on the romantic novel. That's number 11. Honor de Balzac is The Black Sheep. Two rivals fight for the love of a femme fatale. I like that. Wrongly overlooked, according to these guys. Then The Charterhouse of Parma, someone called Stendhal. I've never heard of this one. Penetrating and compelling chronicle of life in an Italian court in post-Napoleonic France. Now, of course, we'll know this one. The Count of Monte Cristo, Alexander Dumas.
Yes, indeed.
I'm reminded of that lovely line from The Shawshank Redemption, when they're both stacking books, and one prisoner says to the other,
library.
You should read this book. It's about a guy that escapes. And he picks up the book. He says, I ain't going to read a book written by a guy called Dumbass.
Alexander Dumbass.
Alexander Dumbass, yeah. Then Benjamin Disraeli. Now, we were talking, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, we reviewed the book Disraeli's Daughters, written by a New Zealander who was related to Disraeli, his illegitimate child. Well, Disraeli was a writer, and he wrote a book called Sybil, S-Y-B-I-L. Apart from Churchill, no other political figure shows literary genius. Well, if he got to number 15, someone thought he was a literary genius.
Somebody recently said this is a British list.
Yeah, this is a British list,
Indeed.
yes. You can't argue, I think, number 16, David Copperfield,
Right.
by Charles Dickens. Then, of course, Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff, yes, yes.
On the moors.
On the moors. And then Charlotte Bronte, another of the Bronte sisters, Jane Eyre. You're a great fan of British novels of that period. Have you
Yes.
read a lot of Bronte?
Yes, I have, and I love it. Well, love them. I love the detail, the carefully observed relationships between individuals.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that
and the tension that
Yeah,
created,
indeed.
yeah.
And I know you're a great Jane Austen fan.
Yes.
Is there can you see a difference in the Bronte approach to their stories?
Yes, I think so. I think that Jane Austen sticks with the intimacy between individuals, where the Brontes take a slightly broader view and perhaps a darker view of humanity sometimes, I think, as well.
Okay, so the Brontes are sitting at 18 and 19, at 17 and 18, sorry, and then Vanity Fair, William Makepeace Thackeray. We mentioned John Bunyan last week, Pilgrim's Progress.
Yes, indeed.
Pilgrim got to Vanity Fair, and Thackeray took that piece from Bunyan and turned it into the story of Becky Sharp. I remember having to read Vanity Fair in the sixth form. I got through it,
Yes.
but it was a bit of a long haul. And then number 20, The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne. You're familiar with that one?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Okay, recommend it?
Yes, I would. Would it be on my top 100 list? I'm not sure about that, but certainly it's worth reading.
A classic investigation of the American mind.
Yes.
So the Americans get a look in at number 20. Okay, so we've got a free Wairarapa book, and then we've got Paddy Richardson, Cross Fingers, and there's your top 20 list of what they think are the best novels.
Excellent. John, thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
We'll be back a little later to talk about the book of the week.
Indeed.
But in the meantime, thank you, folks. We'll have a break now, and then we'll be back to talk to our special guest, Maureen Sudlow.
If the book you are reading late at night is not helping you sleep, maybe it's time for Sleep by Remy Fairman. This natural product helps you to have a normal and healthy sleep. It calms a racing mind and helps with anxiety. Suitable for men and women. Wake up refreshed and able to remember the story. Available from leading pharmacies and health stores.
Welcome back to the Book Show, and it's a great pleasure to introduce our special guest this evening, Maureen Sudlow. Maureen, good evening.
Thank you, Neville.
Thank you so much for being here. Maureen Sudlow, poet, children's author, and a woman focused on creating situations. So tell us a little about Maureen Sudlow.
Oh, well, born and bred in Christchurch, as you can tell from the colours. And I just love books. I've always loved books. I read voraciously. And children's books, I love the contradiction between the text and the pictures. And I love the way that they can meld in and tell two different stories. And poetry has always been something I've enjoyed, so my children's books are mainly in verse.
We'll come back to some of your more serious poetry, but we want to talk a little about this extraordinary book, Fearless Fred and the Dragon. And I read it and I laughed out loud. I thought it was absolutely extraordinary. And so you come to the first page and it says, Fred set out to be a knight with tinfoil for his armour. He took his arrows and his sword in case there was some drama. And so the story launches. Now I tried this on some people in the office and they thought it was wonderful because they wondered what I was laughing about. I spent some time chanting with children and that was great.
Oh yeah.
Little kids didn't quite get the fact that who's the dragon? But tell us about the gestation of this book.
Well, it started out because I had a fascination with the Knights of the Round Table, and there was one particular knight who was called Sir Dinadan, And he was quite unlike all the other knights because he hated killing dragons. He hated saving fair maidens. I mean, he didn't like doing all those things that a knight's meant to do. So I started writing a series of little rhymes, or little stories in rhyme actually, about Sir Ding Dong, with apologies to Sir Dinadan, and that's what started me on the knights. But those particular stories are almost more adult than children, although
Right.
I really enjoy them. And so I wanted to do something that would be more appropriate for children. And imagination plays for children it's so important, the imagination bit, what they think they are, they will actually be. And so that's where he came from.
So shades of A.A. Milne in there as well, about, no other knight in all the land
Yeah,
could do the things
true.
that he could do. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the first book of Fearless Fred?
That is the first. I hope that is the first of a line of Fearless Freds. I do have other Fearless Fred stories written, so fingers crossed.
Yes, all right. Do you think it'll be the same character?
Absolutely the same, and he is the same character. He has wonderful adventures like in puddles and mud and rescuing things from chook houses.
So this is a precursor to
That's
the
a precursor
real work
to-
of saving maidens and storming castles.
yeah, well he saves chickens, I suppose, but not maidens. But I love the colander that he wears.
Yes.
And that was actually Kat's idea, the colander.
Right.
So I was really rapt with that, and we had a session at the library in Dargaville, and we took along an old colander, and one of the children put it on, and he just thought he was wonderful. He had a sword in his hand, a wooden sword, colander on his head, and I've got a photo of him on my computer at home. He was lovely. He just looked like Fred.
All right. So this is extraordinarily well produced, and it's wonderfully illustrated by Kat Quinn Merriweather, who you just mentioned. Tell us a little bit about her and your relationship there.
Well, Kat has her own design studios. She's really a very good designer, a good illustrator, and I found her online and thought I liked what she was doing, so I sent her the text for Fred and said would she be interested, and she was enthused straight away. And she lives in Tawamutu, so that meant a fair bit of travelling to and fro, but it's been a great relationship, and the book is a meld of what happened in the text and what I saw as going on when he was imagining things.
That business of the creation of the character and the focus on, because is that imagined first before you come to the verse?
Oh, definitely. Well, yeah, I think Fred was there first before I wrote about him, because I've always liked little boys who are little boys and not sweet. And so, yeah, Fred was always there. And I think as a child, coming from a big family with very little money, we used our imagination an awful lot. So he's a bit of me in a way too.
This is inviting kids to read books again,
Oh, definitely.
as opposed to straight
Definitely.
to the computer.
Yes, because you can't go back over and over again. With a book, you can think, oh, I must have another quick look back, and it's so much easier with a book.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, I can imagine, because of my little experimentation, I can imagine kids saying, let's go for Fearless Fred, nighttime stories, and all chanting along.
Well,
He rode into the distance, his helmet on his head. Gallop, gallop went the hooves, as through the fields he sped. This is great stuff.
I love it. I just love imagination. I love children.
And so how much time do you spend imagining, as it were? Creative process, writing process for you?
I'm always doing things to do with writing,
Right.
but it's always in the morning, because the mornings seem to be my time
Okay.
being creative. But
I was quite taken to turn to a more serious note by some of the poetry that you've written, and you were kind enough to share some of that. The concept and the structure of a poem that you've called Big Dry, and I wonder where the concept for that came from.
the drought, obviously.
Yes.
We suffered a really long drought up there, and we were desperate for rain. So that's obviously where it came from.
All right. Would it be too cheeky of me to ask you if you'd read it for us?
It's called The Big Dry. Black clouds turned us back from our walk, but they only spat on the deck. Better to get soaked than diverted, and now they're laughing outside my window. Our neighbour had to shift his cows today from one empty paddock to another. Is it okay to covet someone else's rain?
Is it okay to covet someone else's rain?
I haven't answered that yet.
No, I know, but you can imagine that thought occurring inside people who are suffering in a drought.
Oh, yes.
And so when you say up there, where is up there?
Well, up there is actually Dargaville, which is known as the Coomera capital of New Zealand, much to my horror, but it is a lovely place to live, and that's where we are living at the moment.
And that's where you experienced
The drought.
The big dry.
Dargaville is a wonderful community that's very warm, and Rod and I have always been, since we went there, we've been interested in what's happening in the arts, and we've got an artist living just up the road from us, and she and I get together a lot. So there's now a Dargaville Art Association that has a very lovely gallery called the Muddy Waters Gallery, and they have my book in the Muddy Waters Gallery as well, of course.
And so this is the Muddy Waters Gallery because of the
Yes,
river,
because
or
of
because
the
of the
river.
blues band?
Because of the river. It's, you know, it's very appropriate. Everyone says, oh, it's so muddy, that river. But it's a big harbour. It's part of the harbour, and all of the big important rivers are actually muddy.
The big important river just reminds me about the big important river of your journey that's brought you past a number of things to Fearless Fred and on to other things as well. So tell us a little about that.
Well, the start of it is I just love reading, and I decided when we retired that I now had time to write and time to do all the stuff I hadn't been able to do while we were working. And I set out to learn a little more about the writing process, so I did a diploma with Whitireia down in Wellington, just online. And I loved that journey, and it just seemed to me that picture books were the way to go. So that was, I was writing picture books probably before I started doing poetry, even though I love both.
It's one thing to be writing. It's quite another thing to say,
Yeah, I know.
ooh, okay, we'll put it out
Yep.
there and see what people think.
Well, what happened with Fearless Fred is someone said to me, why don't you put it forward for the Joy Cowley Award? So I thought, oh, well, try anything once, you know, maybe I'll get lucky. And he was actually a finalist in the Scholastic Joy Cowley Award. So,
It's beautifully produced as well. How did that come about?
well, when I decided that he was worth publishing, and at that point the publishers, the established publishers, even though he had been a finalist, didn't really want to pick him up, and I thought, oh, well, bother, he's worth it, I'm going to do it myself. Because I'd written other stories about Fred, and I thought I want to be able to follow up something that really works, something that's successful. And Rod, my husband, said, just go for it. And I thought, if I'm going to do it myself, it needs to be well done. So I made sure that I had a good printer, a good illustrator, and just kept a finger on it the whole way through. And yeah, it's been, I've really enjoyed that process. It's been very expensive. We haven't been able to afford a holiday this year. But I've enjoyed the process, and I think my husband having a lot of faith in what I can do has helped.
There's a lot of faith, there's a lot of belief, there's a lot of
Yes.
courage involved in all
That's
of that.
right.
Yeah.
And because you're always sending away things you've written, like you're sending away stories, children's stories, or you're sending away poetry, you send it to publishers, and you can pay for your wall with rejection letters. But I comfort myself with the thought that there's been some really good literature that's been turned down time and time again, you know. So you just keep trying.
So supportive husband, courage, commitment, want to make it happen, but still there'll be those voices saying, oh, is it good enough? And I just wonder, how do you deal with all of that?
Well, there's always a certain amount of that, especially when you get those first rejection letters. You think, oh, well, I'm just not good enough, you know, but you have to put that behind you and keep trying. You have to have faith in what you're creating. And I see so many wonderful stories out there that I think, oh, you know, I can't write like that. And the other little thing that did niggle me a bit was the fact that I can't illustrate my own stories at this point. So that's always a bit of a drawback with children's stories. I really feel that you just have to keep putting it out there and hope that someone else will think you might have something that's worth looking at.
Well, I'd like to congratulate you on a great story, a great story for kids. It's a laugh for adults, and it's beautifully produced as well. And Kat Quinn Merriweather has produced some extraordinary illustrations as well.
She's wonderful. Thank you.
So, thank you.
If the book you are reading late at night is not helping you sleep, maybe it's time for Sleep by Remy Fairman. This natural product helps you to have a normal and healthy sleep. It calms a racing mind and helps with anxiety. Suitable for men and women. Wake up refreshed and able to remember the story. Available from leading pharmacies and health stores.
Good evening, welcome back to the book show, and John, welcome back to you again. We're going to have a look at the book of the week in a minute, but we want to talk to that business of sleep.
Business of sleep. How do you sleep, Neville?
Well, I sleep pretty well, sort of when the care is not ravelling.
Yes, that's right. It's a bit of Shakespeare, isn't it?
Yeah.
But for some people, sleep is a hassle, and there's lots of books written about sleep, magazine articles, and all sorts of things. So we have a product called Sleep. Sleep will help you sleep. So if you're interested in getting a free sample of this product, and we've got 10 of these to give away, then all you need to do is put in the subject line of your email today's book, which is After, AFTER. Just put that in the subject line and then email us at competitionsthebookshow.co.nz, and 10 lucky people will win a complimentary packet of Sleep. So if the book you're reading, and it won't be one of the ones that we review because all our books are really good, but if the book you're reading doesn't put you to sleep, then the natural product called Sleep will do the trick.
So there you are, folks. Competitions at thebookshow.co.nz, and be in to win, as they say. And Maureen Sudlow, I thought, wonderful book. Fearless Fred is a winner.
Oh yeah, I thought very good poetry, and it makes you smile when you're a little kid or in more mature years like you and me.
A couple of big kids like
that. That's the one.
Yeah.
And I thought the illustrations are very good as well.
Yeah,
should be a winner.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. John, book of the week.
Another New Zealand author, quite a different book. This is called After, AFTER, and it's about after grief, and it's a series of short stories written by Elizabeth Carnane. Elizabeth's an interesting character. She has a fine arts degree in sculptural glass from Whanganui Key School of Arts, and she's also worked in Mexico, Habitats for Humanity. She won a short story competition which was broadcast on radio in UK, and she's had a writer's residency in the New Pacific studio in Wairarapa. Lots of writing coming out of Wairarapa, as we said earlier in the program.
We were talking earlier, yes.
Absolutely, so there you go. So she says that this book of hers came out of, well, I'll read you what she said. Over the last 10 years, a number of personal losses have impacted upon me. Most prominently, my father's very unexpected death in 2004. So I've learnt to live in the time after, hence the title. Within my family, we began to talk about before and after, simply in reference to life before and after my father's death. While the stories have a basis of personal experience, they're also written with the freedom that fiction allows. So you might think, oh gosh, a book about death. Oh, ye gods. But they're quite an interesting mixture. And after refers to not only after death, or not only after the death of a person, but in other ways as well. Or animals, in the case of the first story, which is called Tuesday Evening, and it's about a little girl who has her dog, and they're out in the country, and a car comes up at night as dusk is falling, and the dog is killed. It's run over. And she holds it in her arms as it dies, because it's too big to do anything with, and she's aware that it dies. This is the last paragraph, and I think it's a very good example of Elizabeth's writing. After a while, she, that's the girl, eases her arm out from under the dog's head and moves to a crouching position and attempts to pick up the animal. Now a dead weight, the dog is too much for her to carry. The girl walks back down the hill, goes down the side path behind the house and gets the wheelbarrow. Back up the hill. Wheelbarrow angled off the road. Dog heaved into the wheelbarrow. It was practical now. Barrow pushed back down the hill, controlled momentum because the dead weight draws it hastily forward. She tells herself, just a carcass of hair and bone. But the residue of beauty still clings to her, the intensity of those minutes of dying. She wonders if it will be the same at her death. Beautifully written. I've really enjoyed her writing, and
sharply insightful.
very
as
much
well.
so. And not flowery language. It's quite simple. Some of the sentences are just 2 or 3 words long, but it just encapsulates how the little girl would feel and how she deals with this. Inevitably, there's a funeral in one of the short stories. There's a number of short stories, and she has quite an insight. We've all been to funerals, and we all look at funerals with different perspectives, and I think in this case we'd probably ally with her to some extent. It's her father who's dead. One of the funeral directors stands behind the hearse holding a basket of rosemary sprigs. People can place a piece as a symbol of remembrance on the coffin before it's taken to the cemetery and lowered into the dark earth. He, the funeral director, has a look of well-practiced solemnity, not complete indifference. But this is not his father lying in the coffin, nor his brother or husband. Authentic grief reaches out from the eyes only when it's real. Read that line again, because I think that's very good. Authentic grief reaches out from the eyes only when it's real. So that's Elizabeth Carnane, and just come out recently and published by, yes, our friends from Steele Roberts Publishers. So after. I certainly recommend it. I enjoyed it. And lots of food for thought. You put down a book after each short story and you reflect upon it. So I always think it's a mark of a very good book.
John, thank you so much. All right. And thank you, folks. And that's it for tonight. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again next week on The Book Show. Until then, good reading.